Hello, AI Growth Summit. This is MorganMackles. I have 15 plus years of experience in sales and sales management. I am the VP Sales of xdotai, which I'll tell you about in a second. Previously, before xdotai, I was VP Sales of Iron.io, now an Oracle company, and I have been advising VC-backed startups in cloud and tech, including Rainforest QA, and have advisory roles at HeavyBit and the New York City Revenue Collective. My company, xdotai, is an artificial intelligence solution that schedules meetings. Now, I think that in the context of today's presentation topic, the company that I work for, xdotai, is particularly interesting because it does represent a sales tool that can be very useful to reps. It is, however, a tool that requires killing outdated sales rituals, which is the subject today. So to be more specific to the purpose of the summit in general, a lot of us out there are with excellent AI companies such as Inside Sales, Drift, in my company xdotai. And one of the challenges that we face is that when we're working with salespeople, it really does require a little bit of change in the salesperson's mentality or their rituals in order to adopt our new technology. And so that's the subject that I wanted to dive into a little bit today. So as we all know, salespeople are creatures of habit. And as the saying goes, changing habits is hard, or old habits die hard, or whatever phrase you want to throw in there. As I've moved up in my sales career, I have definitely found this to be true. Especially if you're at a larger sales organization, you tend to have less control over individual workflows. And so that can make change management very difficult. And so why is that? What is it that causes salespeople to be creatures of habit? Is it fear, or is it stubbornness, or what really is it? For me, I feel like the number one gating factor that is kind of causing a lot of friction is cognitive overload, meaning that if you're a sales rep out in the world, all you're trying to do is your job, which is being in front of the customers and having high value conversations. And my perspective is that anything that gets in the way of that, even if it's a cool new SaaS tool, can cause cognitive overload. So we're going to talk a little bit about why it is actually important to power through and utilize the best tools, what advantage that's going to give you, as well as some of my experiences and the experiences of my colleagues in how to help your sales team actually adopt those new technologies in a way that's going to be valuable for them and where they're going to be eager and excited to use the new tools. So moving on, there is definitely data that backs up the sentiment that high-performing reps really do have structure. And I think that when I first got into sales almost 20 years ago, I was in big Fortune 500. My first real sales organization was an excellent one. It was ADP, based here on the East Coast, and they had a great sales training program. There is a sales saying that probably people have heard, that the reps that are the best at process and are the best at tracking are maybe not the best performers, and that your top reps are actually the ones that are not doing a very good job with their tracking and Salesforce management and systemization. I would say that in my personal experience is not true. I would agree with the premise here posited by Harvard Business Review that high-performing salespeople do have structured processes. And I will say that this is especially applicable for startups. So a lot of my co-presenters here at the AI Growth Summit, and probably a lot of the listeners, are at smaller startup companies where the speed of your process, the speed of your sales cycle, everything is moving very, very fast. When I was in Fortune 500 at an excellent company like ADP, they had a lot of structure already built in. So following their structure was pretty simple, and maybe didn't take up as much of your cognitive overhead as with a startup. But at a startup, my premise is that you absolutely have to have a scalable and repeatable system. And then as I've moved up and become an overlay and a manager and a director, and now my last couple roles as a VP of sales, I really consider my job to create scalable and repeatable processes that are going to accelerate selling for my company and for my reps. And that does encompass a lot of structure. So how do you build something out that people are actually going to use? The trick is really a balance between two different types of thinking, right? There's one type that is reflexive and automatic. These are habits. And then the second type of thinking, kind of more rational, calculating, and that has to do with explicit cognition. And basically, the highlight is you have to be able to mix in a little bit of both. This slide uses an example of forecasting, and one of the tried and true tasks that we all have in our job is to forecast how you think your sales month or your sales quarter is going to end up. And as this slide is showing you, reps are implicitly using a combination of their reflexive thinking and their rational thinking. So the point here is the best types of tools and the best processes are going to include a little bit of both. So moving on, this is a screenshot of our solution, xdotai. I'm not going to go into it. It's not a sales pitch, but to really use this as an example of how not just salespeople, but all buyers think about moving to new technology. This is really, in summary, a very clear-cut and simple way of looking at it. The idea is you have a pain, and what all of our tools are doing is presenting a solution. Now, this happens to be my product that we're selling to other business users, but think about this in the same way with your own AI solution, right? Even if you're a solution that is helping salespeople out, the salespeople then become your consumers, and they're looking at your tool in the same way. They hopefully have an existing pain that you're addressing, and whatever your solution is, it needs to be simple and clear, because that's the methodology through which you're going to get the best balance of both habit and kind of imprinted behavior as well as the cognitive thinking. So it needs to be very clean and clear and simple. And once you're able to present a clean, clear, simple solution to your salespeople, you will find that you're going to help your adapters who are going to outpace the skeptics. So let's talk a little bit about this concept. I have done webinars recently with sales leaders from great companies like Drift, who's a co-presenter here at the AI Growth Summit, as well as Troops and Mixmax, and we've kind of discussed some of these topics. A few highlights. Start with me, the one on the right. So when I was in field sales, dating myself a little bit here, I was at ADP, and our CRM was called ACT, and it was native on our computers, our laptop. So it wasn't in the cloud, and we had to physically go back to HQ and plug this thing in every day. And we were at ADP one of the first adopters of Salesforce, which is, of course, a cloud solution, which probably sounds ridiculously obvious to people that are selling now, but I can tell you that it was not obvious back then. Very, very different concept that you could be in the field literally making your Salesforce notes in real time. And so I'm going to use that experience in my own career of having a company that adopted Salesforce as a new technology and talk a little bit about my own experience in how that was perceived by many salespeople in the organization to be a difficult ritual to adopt. And I will talk a little bit about my own experience there and kind of what that change towards Salesforce meant to me. Okay, so diagnosing skepticism. So I can tell you, using the same example of Salesforce.com adoption, there were a lot of skeptics. So the quote on the right, in large organizations, challenge is building winning habits across teams that you don't get with interactions day to day. And then on the left, new technologies can make for brutal transitions. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to walk more into the example of Salesforce. And the way that happened at my organization was that being a very traditional sales organization with very tight structure, senior leadership definitely understood the overall value of moving to a cloud solution and how powerful that would be for a large sales force that is nationwide, in the field, knocking on doors, meeting with customers. They saw the power of that new solution. But what happened is that in the actual execution phase, it was very difficult for reps to actually adopt the new technology, to adopt Salesforce. And so Salesforce seems very obvious and intuitive to all of us now, but when we first moved over back at ADP, it was still a relatively young technology. It was definitely buggy, and it was an entirely new way of thinking about doing CRM because it was advantageous to do your notes as you went from call to call, which was a total transition in terms of how you were tracking all of your sales calls and your sales activities as a rep. So the old paradigm, at least for me and probably for a lot of listeners out there that are pre-cloud, for me the habit was collecting notes, whether it was manually in a separate notebook or pieces of paper. I saw all sorts of various methodologies, even recording, notes with, on cell phones or recording devices. And at the end of the day, you would gather all of those notes up with all the business cards, and then you would sit down at your headquarters to dial into your VPN and submit all of the notes into a centralized CRM. And the change in habit with Salesforce was that it was actually more productive for you to be able to do all of that in the field in real time while everything was fresh in your head. Okay. But as you can imagine, was a very new process. And as you can see, from the quote on the left, it did make for kind of a brutal transition, right? Now, one of the subjects I wanted to touch on here is one of the things that I noticed is that there was a kind of a paradigm, self-fulfilling paradigm, when we were presented with that new technology. And what happens is that reps and salespeople really don't like to change unless they're able to see immediate results, and especially if they're successful, right? If you're already successful, there's a lot of risk in changing your behavior and in changing your tool stack and how you do things, because it's there's more fear of loss than there is motivation to gain. If you're already successful, if you're going to change your process, you want to see immediate results, and that's hard. So one of the things that we started to see is that there was a lot of pressure from above to kind of enforce the change management via obligation. So we kind of saw a paradigm where yeah, the top brass in New York, whom I never met in my entire life and were like 7,000 leadership layers above me, they saw the vision and they bought Salesforce and mandated it for all reps across the company, hundreds of reps. What that ended up looking like for me on the ground was that, all of a sudden one day our entire way of doing things changed. They provided a ton of training and a ton of resources for us to learn how to do things correctly. But what you started to see was people treat it like an obligation. And reps would kind of do the bare minimum to prove that they were trying to adapt and doing using the new system. But we sort of fell into that paradigm of the best reps really didn't want to spend any time on process and didn't want to spend time in their CRM. And so it kind of created this culture where people were doing the bare minimum, and managers obviously don't want to slow down their best reps. So they're really helping their reps use the tool through obligation. So what I want to speak about next is how do you kind of get out of that cycle? So if you're a listener and you're selling an AI solution, what is it that you can do to help empower your champions and to get their teams up and running on the tool? And the key to me is you have to prove that there's value in it for them and make it something that they want to adopt rather than something that they have to adopt. So let's talk a little bit about that. So killing the ritual, on the left side, as I mentioned, there's this concept of obligation. And what you really need to focus on is inspiring adoption. So that's really well said. I don't know if it was one of our partners who said that or if it was me, but that's a really important aspect of selling a new tool into a sales team. So again, this is whether you're selling your own tool into your champions, or if you're at an organization that just bought a new AI tool and you're trying to get your reps to adopt the tool. And the key there is really you have to inspire adoption. And in this day and age, it really does imply that there has to be true value and kind of immediate value. So one of the things on the right side, empower your users. So empower them to champion internal innovation. Set up systems of reporting and continued analytics, and ensure that bad habits stay dead. So the concept here, most of our AI tools, what we're trying to do is we're trying to build automation into the processes of our sales reps. And what does that mean, right? Automation and AI are not replacing humans in any way, shape, or form. And I feel like in sales, we really understand that. And in fact, part of our concern is that these extra tools are actually going to make our lives more complicated rather than less, right? Again, that concept of cognitive overload. The same way you hate switching from your CRM over to another tool like your customer success platform or from email into your CRM, you don't want to deal with yet another system and just add on that workload. So part of the key is that this automation really does have to be automatic, as the name implies. It needs to be native to where reps are actually doing their work, and it needs to be very simple for them to use. So, one of the things that we often ask ourselves is what are the tasks that can be automated out, right? So that the reps can really focus on the human element of selling, okay? The reason why salespeople are so important is that, a good salesperson is adding value to the customers using much more of their cognitive and analytic ability, right? So much less of that first type of thinking, which is kind of the automated thinking and the sort of what we would call like low ROI tasks, and allowing them to spend more time and energy on their more human cognitive traits. So consultative selling, really empowering the champion. And I think that our AI tools, for all of the presenters here at the Growth Summit, it's exactly what we're trying to do for our salespeople and our marketing folks, is we're trying to take away aspects of their job that are not menial, but are of a lesser value because they require less of our special human trait and less of our type 2 cognitive thinking and analysis. And so this includes a lot of workflow automation between systems. So for us, it's scheduling meetings. For Conversica, who's another partner here on the at the AI Growth Summit, it's automating conversations with folks that pop onto the website. For companies such as our partner Troops, it's automating the workflow between Slack and Salesforce. And so there's a lot of different ways that AI can assist our sales reps in actually making their lives easier through automation and systemization. So going back to my specific story about when I switched over to Salesforce back at a Fortune 500 company, the key was really establishing yourself as a power user, and then from there, making sure that we were building in systems that would continue to empower other reps going forward. So what actually happened is that we started to find a bit of a bifurcation, right? What happened at my large company is, yes, some of the more senior reps that were unwilling to change, they continued to do things their way. And that was fine. And maybe they cycled out, maybe they moved on to other roles. But what we started to see was a whole separate tranche of younger, more sophisticated reps that really embraced Salesforce. And instead of using it for the bare minimum, instead of just using it to track your calls and provide metrics to your managers, which is not very useful to you as the rep, the early adopting reps, such as myself, started to use Salesforce and adapt it into a way that was actually powerful for us. So what do I mean by that? My CRM, for example, was useful to me once I learned how to create tasks, which seems simple, but it really is a powerful concept, because before CRM, you might be creating tasks for yourself inside of email or in your calendar solution or even on paper. And once I learned how to utilize my CRM or my automation tool to create tasks for myself following each call, to create milestones for myself at a midway of a trial or towards the end of a trial or sales cycle, all of these things allowed me to leverage the tool to actually provide value to myself in terms of improving my own process. And I think that that's the key. So what I am going to kind of shift over to is that concept of engaging the reps. How do you encourage that at your own organization? So what happened for me is I took some of those learnings from CRM and my own experience with adopting CRM as an individual rep. And then throughout my career, I remembered those lessons. And so there's one thing that is absolutely true across all of my sales roles and probably everyone's sales roles, which is that technology and your tech stack as a sales rep is very important, no matter what role you're in, okay? And good leaders are always going to be looking for value add tools and solutions. And I think that a lot of our AI products fit into this bucket. So the key is, if you are positioning as a salesperson, selling these tools into other organizations, you need to help your buyer and your champion think about how they're going to be able to use your tool to enact very rapid change that seems very natural, and change where the reps can actually see value in a very short time span. And what you'll be able to do is really work with the champions at your organization to be able to help their users adopt, right? And so how do you do that? Really the key, what I have really grasped onto when I've gone into leadership roles is making sure that I'm putting myself kind of in the place of the sales rep and having an empathetic attitude when it comes to new tools. So I still use Salesforce today. I'm still stuck on that old paradigm. But the difference is working in startups and working in very fast-paced environments is that while the expectation is that my reps are definitely using Salesforce to do the simple stuff like logging calls and tracking activities, I encourage them to think about ways that the CRM can be useful to them. So what is it that we can do to take this tool and actually turn it into something that's going to help them sell, and as opposed to something that they're just kind of forced to use. So a few examples for myself, because the concept of tasks was so powerful. I'm a big proponent of tasks. So in my company, we use a lot of Salesforce tasks. We send them to each other. We do call note follow-up, and we send multivariate tasks to different people within the sales team. And we have, of course, other tools that help accelerate the speed of these tasks by incorporating Salesforce tasks into our stack, as in they can be synced with our calendar. We are tracking the completion of those tasks through tools like Mixmax and Troops, and that's been very powerful for us. Additionally, one of the things that I like to do with my CRM is I have our opportunity sales stages tied very closely to our process and vice versa. So rather than using the opportunity area of the CRM tool as a chore, I think about it as something that is actually helping empower the salespeople to get from stage to stage to stage, in a very clean and clear manner, where we're taking some of the art and mysticism out of the sale and turning it into a bit of a science. And that has some value because, first of all, it means that your salespeople, again, it's less cognitive overload because they're not thinking about what do I have to do next. They're only thinking about how do I achieve it. So again, they're not using that type 1 thinking where they're trying to just move from simple task to simple task. What they're actually able to do is to spend their brain power and their cognition on the higher level thinking of what strategy would be best to move me from opportunity stage 40 to opportunity stage 50, right? And I think for each one of our tools, our sales solutions, we really need to be thinking about how can we position our sales solution so that we can help our champions or our managers get ROI out of our product in a way that the reps are going to understand, but it's going to be intuitive, and it's also going to help them free up their time to do the heavy cognitive thinking, right? And that's really the power of AI. What AI can do is again, it just really empower salespeople to spend their time and energy on the value add aspects of their roles. And that goes for AI in pretty much every facet. So again, at xdotai, it's scheduling meetings, and this is very valuable for busy salespeople. So that's SDRs, AEs, CSMs, sales engineers. It takes the menial task of scheduling meetings out of their hands so that they can spend more time and energy on their value add. But our solution, probably like many of the other solutions for listeners today, actually works for other knowledge workers. So we have a lot of customers that are in recruiting. We have a lot of customers that are in executive roles. And you always need to kind of ask yourself with your solution, what is it that your AI solution is providing that can take away, menial, low ROI tasks and really let those high-level knowledge workers spend their time and energy in front of people, creating those human-to-human interactions, because that's where your knowledge workers are really providing the company the most ROI. So some tricks for making sure that there's wide adoption throughout your organization. Your power users should be sharing success with others on the team. So if you have folks within your own organization that are doing well, I would encourage you to let them share. So I'm a big fan of lunch and learns. I've been at companies where we do technical time or learning time every week. And I would say that training from reps to reps on best practices within sales tools is extremely effective. It can be much more powerful than training by managers. And I would definitely encourage that as a best practice. And of course, that also applies to all of us when we're selling into our clients, right? Your champion is really going to be there training the rest of their group. As much support as you're providing, most statistics tell us that your internal champion at your prospect is spending more time talking to the decision makers at your target companies than you are. So you really need to empower them by not only teaching them how to use the tool, but empowering them with every type of training material, ROI calculation, everything that you possibly can to prove to them that your AI tool is something that is valuable and can be massively adopted at their company, so that they're not the only ones that are going to be benefiting, but the whole company or all the reps are actually going to be gaining value from your tool. So that's the end of the presentation, and I want to thank everybody at the AI Growth Summit, as well as all of the participants and listeners. I haven't been pitching my product too much throughout the presentation, but did want to make sure that guests from the AI Growth Summit do have a chance to try out xdotai. So you can see on your screen, we are offering an $80 credit, which will help you get started on the team version of xdotai. We'll tell you more about it on the site, or we're happy to talk to you about it in person. Just go to x.ai/R030T5. Again, that's x.ai/R030T5. And we will talk to you about a free credit to try out our solution. So thanks so much, and hope that you enjoy the rest of the Growth Summit.